From the frozen steppes of the north came 30,000 Mongol warriors, iron-armored riders who had crushed kingdoms, burned empires, and brought the world to its knees. They believed no wall too high, no nation too small to conquer. But far to the south, beyond rivers and mist, stood a kingdom of barely 100,000 defenders. Farmers, fishermen, and warriors fighting not for glory, but for survival. When the most feared army on earth met a people who would rather burn their cities than surrender, the world awaited another swift Mongol victory. Instead, what unfolded would defy history itself. A storm met another storm, and in that clash of fire and thunder, a legend was born that would echo through the ages. In the final days of 1257, a shadow swept across Asia, the shadow of the Mongol Empire. 30,000 riders armored in iron and fire moved south like a storm of steel. They had crushed kingdoms, burned cities, and left the world trembling in their wake. Now their eyes turned toward a small kingdom beyond the Red River, Jai Viet. The great Khan demanded tribute, but in the court of Thung Long, Emperor Tran Thai Tong refused. He had rebuilt his nation from civil unrest, strengthened its people, and would never bend his knee to a foreign ruler. His defiance enraged the empire. To the Mongols, refusal meant only one thing: war. The invasion was placed under Uriyangkadai, son of the legendary Subutai, the same mind that had brought Europe to its knees. Uriyangkadai commanded a hardened army of 30,000 men, forged in endless conquest, swift horse archers, armored lancers, and engineers who could tear down walls in hours. Their strength was speed, discipline, and fear itself. No army in Asia could stand before them, until now. Against them stood a force of roughly 100,000 Vietnamese, drawn from farmers, fishermen, and local militias. They lacked armor, horses, and organization, but they had something far greater. They knew their land, the rivers, the jungles, the shifting tides of their homeland. And they fought not for gold or glory, but for survival. Emperor Tran Thai Tong understood that facing the Mongols head-on would mean destruction. Instead, he turned to the wisdom of strategy, crafting a plan of patience and deception. His vision was clear: withdraw the army, abandon the capital, lure the invaders into hunger, disease, and despair, and then strike when the time was right. To the Mongols, retreat meant weakness. To the Vietnamese, it meant survival. And as the iron tide advanced toward Thung Long, the emperor's words echoed through the ranks: "Let them come. The land will fight with us." By the dawn of 1258, the iron wave from the north had reached the heart of Jai Viet. Villages burned behind them, fields turned to ash, and the cries of the displaced carried through the wind. To the Mongols, it was another march of conquest, another nameless kingdom soon to be erased from their maps. Uriyangkadai rode ahead of his army, his armor blackened with dust, his eyes cold as stone. His scouts returned with the same report again and again: no resistance. The Vietnamese army had vanished into the jungles. Their people fled, their cities abandoned. To him, it was victory without battle. But to Emperor Tran Thai Tong, it was only the beginning of the trap. While the Mongols advanced, the emperor had already executed his plan. The capital of Thung Long was emptied. Its people were ordered to evacuate, granaries sealed, bridges burned, and wells poisoned. Every trace of life erased, leaving behind only stillness. The mighty city, once filled with laughter and light, was now a silent ghost. When the Mongol vanguard entered the gates, they found no soldiers, no crowds, no sound, only wind and dust. Horses clattered through empty streets, banners hung over deserted markets, and the great palace stood open, its throne hall bare. Uriyangkadai dismounted, gazing at the emptiness in disbelief. He had conquered nothing but air. He declared victory nonetheless. Fires were lit in the courtyards. His troops feasted in the royal halls, raising toasts to the great Khan. Yet as the night deepened, unease settled over the camp. The air was thick, the mist heavy. From the shadows of the river, unseen eyes watched their every move. Far away along the Red River, Emperor Tran Tai Tong stood aboard his flagship. Behind him, hundreds of warboats waited in silence. The soft beat of drums echoed across the dark water, a heartbeat of the land itself. His generals stood beside him, their faces hard, their resolve unshaken. "The time of patience is over," the emperor said quietly. "Let them think we are broken. At dawn, the rivers will rise." And as the first drops of rain began to fall, the mist thickened over Thunglong. The storm was ready to strike. Dawn broke over the Red River like the breath of a sleeping beast. Mist curled above the water, thick and white, veiling the shapes that moved beneath it. To the Mongol sentries camped along the riverbank, it was just another quiet morning in a conquered city. But beneath the fog, unseen and silent, the army of Jai Viet was waiting. Emperor Tran Tai Tong stood aboard his flagship at the center of the fleet. Around him, hundreds of warboats, sleek, low, and deadly, floated in perfect silence. On their decks, men gripped spears and oars, their faces painted black with soot. They waited for the signal, hearts pounding like drums against their chests. Across the mist, the faint sound of laughter drifted from the Mongol camp. Soldiers feasted on stolen grain, their guards lazy and half asleep. Their horses stood knee-deep in the river, drinking. Uryankadai's command banners hung limply in the humid air. The invincible army had grown complacent. Then came the sound, the deep rolling thunder of a war drum. One beat, then another, then 100. The river erupted. From the fog burst the warboats of Jai Viet, their oars slicing through water like blades. Arrows darkened the sky. Flaming projectiles streaked across the river, crashing into the Mongol camp in explosions of fire and chaos. Horses screamed, tents ignited, and men stumbled from their sleep into a nightmare of smoke and confusion. "Strike now!" the emperor shouted, and the fleet surged forward. From every side, Vietnamese soldiers poured in, some by boat, others emerging from the riverbanks and mangroves where they had hidden through the night. The Mongols, trapped between fire and water, scrambled to form ranks, but the ground beneath them was soft, treacherous mud. Their cavalry could not charge. Their arrows misfired in the thick mist. What followed was chaos and fury. The clash of steel echoed through the morning air. Spears shattered shields, blades met armor, and men wrestled in knee-deep water, slick with mud and blood. Mongol officers shouted commands, but the roar of battle drowned their words. The steppe warriors fought fiercely, but for the first time, they found themselves fighting an enemy they could not read, in a land that belonged to its defenders. From the flagship, Emperor Tran Tai Tong watched the tide turn. His generals executed the plan with ruthless precision. General Tran Khandu led the vanguard, cutting off the Mongol retreat toward the northern bank, while Tran Hung Zhao struck from the flank, driving the invaders deeper into the river's jaws. The coordination was perfect, almost invisible, a dance of war learned from generations of struggle. Uryankadai's banners wavered in the chaos. His officers fell one by one. The Mongol formation collapsed under their relentless assault. Warriors tried to mount their horses, only to be dragged down by nets and spears. Their famed cavalry, once the terror of continents, was useless in the choking mud. By midday, the Red River ran red with blood. The last Mongol boats overturned as flaming arrows found their mark. Survivors fled toward the north, abandoning their dead, their weapons, and the illusion of invincibility. From his deck, the emperor lowered his sword. Around him, the drums slowed to silence. The mist began to lift, revealing a battlefield of wreckage and flame. The invaders were gone, and in that silence, the warriors of Jai Viet raised their voices in a single, thunderous cry. For their king, for their land, for their freedom. The Mongol army broke. What had once been an iron formation of 30,000 men was now a torrent of chaos. Horses plunging through mud, soldiers screaming, commanders cut down in the crush. The Red River glimmered beneath the smoke. choked with the wreckage of war. For the first time in their history, the warriors of the steppe were not hunting. They were being hunted. From the banks, Vietnamese drums thundered like the heartbeat of the land itself. Warboats surged through the current, slicing through debris and fleeing enemies. Archers loosed arrows in sweeping arcs that caught the morning sun, each shaft finding a target. The air was alive with the sound of pursuit, paddles striking water, hooves pounding along the river roads, and the unending cry of warriors shouting in victory. Uriankadai rode among the survivors, his armor scorched, his horse bleeding. His orders were drowned in panic. The great general who had once crossed continents now found himself trapped in a land that turned against him. The rivers he thought to ford had become walls. The forests he burned now hid an army at every turn. Each path north led only to more ambushes, more death. At Zhongbo Jiao, the Mongol rearguard tried to form a line to protect their retreat. They barely had time. From the south, Tran Hengjiao's infantry charged, their war cries splitting the air. From the river, the emperor's fleet unleashed another barrage of fire arrows. The two forces met in an explosion of noise and fury. Spears clashed, shields splintered, and the water boiled with the struggle of men and horses. Those who tried to flee by land found the bridges gone, cut by the retreating Vietnamese days before. Those who tried to swim were dragged down by nets and hooks. The very ground seemed to turn against them. By midday, the Red River had become a graveyard of bodies, banners, and broken dreams. And still, the chase continued. Through the wetlands and rice fields, the Vietnamese pressed the pursuit. The sound of gongs and drums echoed from every village, signaling the next ambush. Farmers, peasants, and soldiers alike joined the hunt, striking from hidden paths, pelting stones and javelins into the routed horde. It was no longer an army, it was prey, running blind through a country that had risen as one. Uriankadai's horse stumbled. Mud splashed across his armor as he turned north, his remaining officers close behind. They rode without formation, without honor, only with the desperate will to survive. Behind them, the thunder of Vietnamese war drums grew louder, closer, relentless. By the time the sun began to set, the Mongols were no more than shadows retreating into the mountains of Yunnan. They left behind their dead, their weapons, and the illusion of invincibility that had followed them across the world. On the banks of the Red River, Emperor Tran Tai Tong watched the horizon fade into dusk. The smoke rose like a dark veil over the water, and the cries of victory still echoed through the delta. The impossible had happened. The army that no one could defeat had been destroyed. The emperor bowed his head, not in pride, but in reverence, to his people, his land, and the spirit that had carried them through the storm. For the Mongols, it was the first true defeat of their empire in the Far East. For Jai Viet, it was the beginning of legend. Evening fell over the Red River Delta. The fires still burned where the battle had raged, their smoke curling into the crimson sky. The air was thick with the scent of iron, sweat, and ashes, the scent of victory and of loss. Along the riverbanks, the warriors of Jai Viet stood in silence. Some prayed for the fallen, others stared at the drifting bodies on the current, too tired to speak. The drums that once roared with fury were now still, replaced by the gentle sound of the tide washing over shields and broken spears. Emperor Tran Tai Tong walked among his soldiers. His armor was dented, his robe torn by smoke and blood. Yet his face was calm. Around him men knelt as he passed, not in ceremony but in reverence, for they had seen their king not as a ruler above them, but as a man who stood beside them, who fought for the same soil beneath their feet. When he reached the river's edge, the emperor looked toward the north. Beyond those distant hills lay Yunnan and the broken trail of the Mongol retreat. They had come as a storm, and they had left as shadows. No army had ever returned from Jai Viet unscarred. The lesson had been carved into the bones of empire. This land could be entered but never conquered. The victory came at a heavy cost. Villages burned, fields flooded, families displaced. Yet amid the ruin, something greater had been forged, a unity born of fire. The emperor's strategy had proven that wisdom could triumph over brute strength, that the will of a people could outlast the might of empires. As the first stars appeared, the soldiers began to sing, a low, weary song carried by the evening wind. It spoke of fathers and sons, of rivers and freedom, of a home worth dying for. Their voices rose together, echoing across the delta where smoke still lingered. High above them, the imperial banner of the Tran dynasty fluttered in the fading light, tattered, blackened, but still standing. The Mongols had come to test the heart of a nation, and in the heart of Jai Viet, they found something they could not defeat. Weeks passed before the smoke over the Red River faded. When the emperor's fleet sailed back toward Thunglong, the waters glimmered with the reflection of a sky reborn. The city that had once been abandoned now rose again, its people returning from the forests and marshes, carrying what little they had left. Broken walls were rebuilt, temples relit their lanterns, and the sound of hammers replaced the echo of war. At the center of the capital, Emperor Tran Tai Tong stood before his people. He had no golden crown, no jeweled robe, only the scars of battle and the calm of a man who had seen death and refused defeat. Before him knelt soldiers and peasants alike, the line between them erased by sacrifice. In that moment, the emperor spoke not as a ruler, but as the voice of a nation reborn. They came with fire and steel, he said, and found a land that would not burn. Let this victory remind our children that freedom is not given by kings, but earned by those who stand together. His words carried through the courtyards, the rivers, and the mountains beyond. The story of Zhongbozhao spread from village to village, from songs sung by farmers to tales whispered by monks. It was no longer just a battle, it became a promise, a reminder that even the smallest nation, if united, could defy an empire. Years later, when the Mongols returned with even greater numbers, they would find a people ready, armed not only with weapons, but with memory, with the belief that their ancestors had once faced the storm and survived. For generations, the victory at Zhongbozhao burned in the heart of Jai Viet like an undying flame. It became the foundation of a legend, the proof that courage and wisdom could turn the tide of history. As twilight fell over Thunglong, the emperor walked alone along the riverbank. The war was over, but the echoes of drums still lingered in the wind. He looked at the red glow of the sunset reflected in the river's surface and whispered softly, "The land endures, because its people endure." And with that, the story of a small kingdom standing against the greatest empire on earth was carried by time, etched forever into the soul of a nation.